Welcome to Earthshare. I'm Paloma, and this is Levi. I'd like to take this opportunity to once again thank our partners. Thank you to Arlington Gardens, and thank you immensely to Nature for All for helping make this project happen, for all of your support, and for helping us continue our conversation outside of the garden and with more and more people. Today's guest is Tim Martinez. He is the Land and Program Administrator at Arroyos and Foothills Conservancy, and he is also on the City of Pasadena's Recreation and Parks Commission. He works in a lot of different areas with bringing youth out into nature that's very close by, in helping educate on wildlife corridors, on helping the native plants and animals in the community and areas. So we can invite Tim and start our conversation for today. Good morning, everyone.
There he is.
Hi, Tim.
Hi, Paloma. Hi, Levi. Good to see you both.
Hello.
Nice to see you.
Well, I'm glad we're doing this.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. I also love that so many people that we've been talking with want to call in from being outside.
I had to, my wife Laura was just asking me, "You're going outside right now?" And I said, "Well, it's nice outside, I mean, I can't talk to y'all and just be cooped up inside." So yeah, and actually, I got some shade, so even in this heat, it's pretty nice out. So
Yeah, agreed. So we'd like to start by asking you, what does nature mean to you?
oh my gosh, what a question, because I guess, I think about nature all the time, but I don't always, maybe I don't really usually think about what does nature itself mean. I guess, I see nature as sort of our underlying reality. So whenever I'm trying to really just think of reality and sort of just, the way things go, the reality of I guess the order of the world, I think of nature. So it's a very broad thing to me. It's kind of hard to, although we do separate ourselves from it a lot, especially I think kind of in our civilization where, we sort of are, I don't know, a lot of things can tend to be sort of artificial, and we can kind of be abstracted maybe away from nature in a lot of ways. But really, when I really think about what does nature mean to me, it seems pretty hard for us truly to be separate from nature. I mean, even like, it's not just the trees and all the, like the ecosystem, but it's all of reality, right? That's all part of nature. So it's ultimately, I kind of think it's hard not to be in nature. So that's kind of the way I look at it. And just I guess more immediately, when I'm out on the land or something, and when I'm out in like a more or less intact ecosystem or native habitat, to me that's like the highest representation of reality, of like a natural order. I mean, this is the environment that all life really sort of evolved into, and so I guess for me that's sort of like the highest manifestation of reality. And so, of course, there's so much to be learned from that.
So given this, as you were saying, natural order and highest form of reality within our local landscape, where and what were your earliest memories within that context?
That's another great question. You mentioned, some of the work that I'm involved in, and, I know a lot of other people do, which is trying to introduce young people to nature. And one of the reasons that that's so important to me, and I know, just how important and profound that can be, is because of my young experiences in nature. I mean, locally, I was very fortunate that my mom brought me and my younger brother down to the Lower Arroyo Nature Park in Pasadena, and that was back in the probably like the mid 1990s. And so the low flow streams had pretty much just been installed, and they were, brand new. So there was just flowing water along those low flow streams, and just all these fresh saplings and trees growing, and little tadpoles and stuff. And so I really got to enjoy sort of, even though it's a bit artificial, I mean, as much as possible, a little restored section of the lower arroyo down there. And that was just magical for me as a child. Another very formative experience for me was I went to Linda Vista Elementary School in Pasadena, back in the day. And in fourth grade, they took us to, we had like a whole nature series where they took us every week on the bus. We'd go to Munga Watershed Park. And so I got to see, I remember, actually, it's a very vivid, almost magical memory for me. When I first saw the arroyo stream flowing, this is above Devil's Gate Dam, right, in Cajamonga, flowing free, a natural, free-flowing water. And when I was in fourth grade, I mean, to me, it was like magic, I mean, I had only seen natural streams like that up in the Sierra Nevada mountains or something when I visited family, and that was awesome. But to see it just a short drive away was really amazing. And I'll share one more really sort of formative experience for me growing up that really influenced me. Was that I grew up on a cul-de-sac in West Pasadena, right up against the hills, and at the top of my cul-de-sac is just a big county chain link fence and all these menacing signs about if you go past this fence, you're going to go to prison for 6 months and $1,000 fine and all these really crazy things. And my friend Joey, who I grew up with up the street, was a little bit more, back in those days, I'd say rebellious or rambunctious than I was. I kind of wanted to follow all the rules, and so he took me and we slipped under the chain link fence up there and past the county debris basin. And we got into this little canyon in the hills. It was all Art Center land, Art Center College of Design land that we were pretty much, sneaking onto. And there was a little spring, like a stream just gushing out of the hills. And it's just, again, magical. And I used to dream about that spring. It was just like, I couldn't believe that it was right there. I couldn't believe that I'd lived all, 9 years of my life or something and never seen that before. And so, these experiences were just, like I said, just so formative. And now I get to work to help save places like that and have a relationship with those places and try and restore them and make them better and connect other people and kids. And so, I really, I know from experience just what a profound impact those connections, those touches, as we call them, with nature can have on young people, and who knows what seeds they might plant for them, going forward into the future.
Tim, can you talk more specifically about some of that work that you do? I know that you work with Arroyos and Foothills Conservancy, and I know more recently with Pasadena Parks and Recreation. Do you want to talk about what kind of work, the specifics of that work?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. So, my job is that I'm the program and land administrator for Arroyos and Foothills Conservancy, which is a nonprofit land trust based in Pasadena. Really what we do at AFC is our mission is to preserve land. Oftentimes it's land that's under threat of development. And, we really started off to just preserve land in order to save nature. But as the years have gone by, a big focus of ours has really been to connect up a lot of our fragmented areas, like the San Rafael Hills, the Verdugo Mountains. These are all being surrounded by freeways and roads and development, and they're becoming like islands of habitat where wildlife can't get in or out. And actually, there's a study, I forget who the authors were, but we reference it sometimes in our grant writing, that identifies wildlife corridors and maintaining, enhancing wildlife corridors as the number one way we can preserve biodiversity in the face of climate change. So, we live in a very special region here in Southern California. We're in one of the most biodiverse regions on Earth. So we have lots of plant life that is only here and nowhere else. We have lots of, wildlife, and we're surrounded by a lot of really wonderful nature. And really one of the best ways we can keep it healthy and keep the ecosystem diverse is by connecting these fragmented areas so that wildlife and even plants can move through them. So that's a big focus of ours. My job specifically with AFC in my capacity is that I help steward the land. So I help oversee, just taking care of the land, doing our annual, fire fuel reduction, overseeing habitat restoration, trail work, stuff like that. Just basically, trying to make the land better, just take care of it, make it healthier, get it back to its native habitat. And then I'm also, I oversee all of our programs to connect the communities that we serve with our protected lands, with our nature preserves. And so that's where a lot of the education comes in. We had a really robust field trip program before COVID, and unfortunately we had to cancel like 50 field trips. I mean, we were paying for buses. We had a really generous grant, and we were able to pay for transportation for schools and stuff. They didn't have those resources, and get people out for all sorts of wonderful field trips out in nature, out in our preserves. That's now morphed into a virtual field trip program, but we have docent-led tours, we have volunteer days where you can get out there and restore the land, take out the invasives, help bring it back to its native habitat. So we have all sorts of really great programs that help connect the community that we serve with the protected lands. And really most importantly, so that people in the local communities can have a sense of ownership, in their own backyard and help, be involved in these special places and help take care of them. So that's basically, very briefly, my job with AFC. And you also did ask, I also am a commissioner in Pasadena. I'm on the Recreation and Parks Commission. My personal, I guess, just because of my own experiences growing up in the Arroyo and stuff, my personal goals there is I just really want to be an advocate for balancing nature with recreation, making sure that our parks can be, obviously somewhere, it's so necessary for our health, right, and for our well-being in so many ways. But I want to make sure that it's, these are places where we not only can recreate, but that they're, places that make our community healthier, that make our, kind of like Arlington Garden, right, provide habitat, so I think that our parks can be very, very dynamic. And I actually think Arlington Garden is an excellent example of how dynamic open space like a park can be, where, it can provide for people, but also for saving water and, biodiversity and birds and pollinators and all sorts of stuff. So that's sort of, maybe what I hope to bring to the Recreation and Parks Commission. So we'll see what happens. I hope the community gets involved.
What do you think, as far as the parks, your work there, what do you think some of the opportunities are to grow, especially like you're saying, we tend to gear our park spaces towards human need, which is important, our health and being able to get out in the open and share space with each other. But I wonder what opportunities you see to enhance the ability for that to be wildlife habitat for birds and all kinds of also native plants.
That's a really great question. I haven't even been on the commission for a year, but this is something that I really, I hope that my fellow commissioners can sort of learn more about all of these things. Because the thing is that, and you're interviewing folks in our community, there are so many people, wonderful people in our community who they know the best practices. They know the answers to all of these things. They really know how we can make our region much more beautiful, much more sustainable and resilient, and full of life. So I hope that we can educate people within like our city government and stuff to really realize that I think the greatest resource that we have is our community, the people in our community. And so just off the top of my mind, I would love to see bioswales, swales in our parks. So I put on the agenda to get Sylvia Holmes and Tahare, I forget how to exactly pronounce her last name, I think Shirazi, wonderful people in our community with beautiful bioswales, and they gave a great educational talk. And I think none of the other commissioners really had ever heard of a bioswale, so that's a start. I think we should have bioswales in all of our parks. I know the Theodore Payne Foundation has, if I remember correctly, they have a goal of, I think, at least 50 or some, percent of, native plants in our, they want to see that in our landscapes here. And so I think, why not have as many native plants in the landscaping as possible? Native trees, so I'd like to see a lot more native plants. I'd like to see water saving, like hugels and, bioswales. I think we can incorporate all of these practices. It's actually going to save us money. It's going to make our parks so much more beautiful and resilient and full of life. And it's going to make them so much of a richer resource for our community. I mean, think about all the education. Think about I think there's just so many opportunities that we can have if we make our parks more dynamic, sort of take a more holistic approach. And so I'm going to be trying to reach out to all of the wonderful members in our community who are experts and who are doing this type of work and have been doing it. And I'm going to try and bring them into, basically bring them into the process. And, sometimes change can be sort of incremental like this, but I'm hoping that we can make some good change and implement a lot of these, really wonderful ideas and practices that are, not new, but I think that they could really make our parks just much more dynamic.
It would be really exciting to see all of our parks look more like Arlington.
Yes.
In the way that Arlington does all of those things that you're describing and is also free and open to the public, right?
Oh, absolutely. And, I have to share, I have 6 summer interns right now. We were very unsure as to whether we would be able to even have interns this summer, but we modified the program and we're social distancing and wearing masks. And so we're doing it safely. But it's made field trips a little bit harder because we used to go on a field trip every Friday and we'd go up into the mountains or we'd go to, Rancho Santa Ana. I know they recently changed their name, the California Botanic Garden. And we can't really pile into the same van anymore. So we've had to kind of get creative and we're staying more local. And maybe a week or two ago, we went down to Arlington because that was close and we could just kind of, walk in. And I have to tell you, after we went on our tour of Arlington and just looked all around for over an hour, all of my interns, they're mostly all high school kids this year. And they're from, some of them are from the Valley, some of them are from downtown LA. They said, I've never seen a park like this before. They're like, I'm going to come back here. Like, oh my gosh, And so just, it was really, I think it just speaks volumes that, that these are teenagers and they're used to just turf and, trees and bushes, ornamental hedges, and, for them, it was just a totally different experience in such a good way to actually go to a place like Arlington. They said, they're like, you totally can, kids can totally play here, and so it doesn't necessarily have to be the traditional type of park that we think of. So I really do think Arlington's an excellent example of more what our parks should and can look like.
To speak more on the idea of community in all its various forms, how do you feel like you are able to support the community you are in and how the community supports you and the work you are doing?
Oh, interesting. So how am I able to support the community I'm in? I guess I've been trying to do that for years, and luckily for me, it ended up leading to a career. But wow, what a question. I try to see where I might be able to fit in and make a contribution. And one thing always leads to the next. So I guess the most important thing is just to realize, what are you passionate about? What do you care about? And, find like-minded people. And I have a lot of mentors. I have a lot of people who, I'm friends with, who I work with in the community. And I consider, both of you among those people. And, it's just kind of like just all collaborating together, towards a better vision of things. And so I guess that's sort of how I see it. I see it as community. And so I just try and see where I fit into that, like what is within my power to, sort of try and make some good contributions and affect that change. And so I guess that's my best answer for that.
Great. I'd like to take this moment to remind the audience that you're welcome to type in any questions you have for us and Tim into the comment section, and we will read them at the end of our interview. So our next question is something we've been thinking a lot about recently, and that's the idea of equity and access to the outdoors for everybody in our communities. And how do you see that play a role in your work?
That's a great question because, I've been discussing from my experience growing up, that I've been very privileged to have access to nature my entire life, and it was, again, formative for me. I mean, it's profound. And I like to say that it planted seeds, because I had this access, this experience as a child, and later on, it's this access to nature is something I really leaned on, and it helped me just so much. And the thing is that not everyone has that type of access. So I think that's an issue of equity, first and foremost. I mean, being a Recreation and Parks Commissioner, I know that not everyone has access to parks. Working with AFC, before COVID, we had a very generous grantor and from a family foundation, and one of his top priority was getting underserved youth out into nature, and that's why we were able to pay for buses, and really broaden our impact, I think, and work with, we could take schools that otherwise didn't have resources for transportation, who were in maybe more of an urban environment, and say, hey, we're happy to get you some buses and get you out into the foothills, and so you can have that outdoor education. Because there's so many studies that show how having outdoor education, which is not something that all schools have, it's basically just schools that have those resources. It helps students they perform better. They perform better in a variety of other subjects, right? And so basically, I guess when I think of equity, I think of how profound of a positive impact access to nature can be, how not everyone has that, and I think that they should, and I think that they deserve that. And really, I don't think there should be one bad or unhealthy place on this planet. Every community should have nature. Every community should be healthy, and unfortunately, that's not the case. And so, I think that work with equity is making sure that we move in a direction so that is the case. I guess that's the most simple way I can put it. I'm sure there are other people who've given this a lot more thought.
I think it's interesting, the idea of bringing especially young people and people who are living in the city and making access possible especially to our local foothills and mountains. But I think that you double down on that idea when you bring our foothills and mountains back into
the city. Right? Yes.
And yes. I think it's interesting how you overlap with these two spaces that you work in, which is our local foothills and how that wildlife interacts with our urban communities, and also working with Parks and Rec to say, look, these are also viable habitat spaces. One of the questions we had from our audience was, in addition to planting native plants, what can we do in our parks and in our homes to create spaces that support wildlife?
That's a really great question. So, as far as parks and my role, which I've been on the Recreation and Parks Commission in Pasadena for less than a year, so I feel like I'm just getting started. What I really would like to see, and I haven't seen this happen nearly as much as I think it should, is I would like to see civic leaders, people within city government, connecting more with members of the community that really are already doing this work. Because I feel like there's just so much, grassroots work. There's so many people who would love to have a community garden. There's so many people who would love to tend native gardens and stuff in our city parks, or to have areas in our city parks, or really to, be part of the planning process where, we can implement things like, bioswales and native plants, and basically bring, like you said, bring nature back into the city and back into the parks. And that's just going to be such a resource, not only for education, but, in so many all the other benefits of habitat and water saving and climate resilient, landscapes and all sorts of stuff. So I guess what I would like to see and what I would like to hopefully in some way help facilitate is let's connect with the community groups that are already doing this work, that are already in the community, and basically empower them, and put the, our sort of our civic process or whatever processes, behind that, and just, engage people. I majored in urban planning, so one thing that I really took away from that was it can't just be a top-down approach. It has to be also bottom up, right? So you kind of have to do it both ways. So I really would just like to somehow bridge, sort of like the civic side of things, with like, how do we empower the people who already want to do this work, but they don't have all the resources, and how do we enable people to do the great work that they're going to do? So that's really, I guess, my approach. We'll see what happens with that. And a lot of people ask, what can they do at their house? I mean, a lot of people don't have a backyard. I can't tell you how many times I've led a nature walk out on a nature preserve or something, and people say, I would love to plant native plants, but I don't have a yard. And what I tell them is, I mean, first of all, there's a lot of really great resources for even just having to contain, herbs in your on your windowsill. You can plant cilantro. You can plant, different herbs. You can have a patio garden and have a few tomatoes. That's just one minor way to start. Another thing is that there, I mean, look at how many people, maybe in your family, maybe your friends, have space, like yard space and stuff, that they just have a lawn and they're not otherwise utilizing. I mean, maybe that's another opportunity, or maybe community gardens. I don't know. So I think that, maybe trying to broaden out your network like that can help give people some access to having a little, piece of the earth where they can tend, and build a relationship with nature.
Yeah, I can't help but now just continuing to picture little Tim having to squeeze under a fence that, is trying to keep him and everyone else out in order to access nature right in your backyard. And what a vision it would be to be able to have, open, free space for everybody to be able to connect with the land that they're living on and creating roots on. And so we have a few more questions from people, and someone's asking, how can home or balcony gardeners help with wildlife, with helping wildlife survive in this urban area?
Wow. So people who have like are doing balcony gardening. That's a great question. But even just having like some native plants on a balcony is providing habitat for pollinators and birds and so on and so forth. I really am going to want to give that question some more thought on my own, actually, as far as like, so I'll back up, I'll rewind really quick. At AFC, we're in our 20th anniversary. We've been doing this for 20 years. We were going to have like a really big exhibit and a really great, basically year-long celebration of 20 years and what's ahead. And the whole theme was going to be basically living in a wildlife corridor and reaching out to all of the communities that are within. We have a main wildlife corridor that we're trying to realize, which is we call the Munga to Tahunga Wildlife Corridor. It's a 20-mile long corridor that seeks to connect the San Gabriel Mountains at Munga with the San Rafael Hills, the Verdugo Mountains, and we have Glendale and we have parts of the valley all around there, up with Big Tahunga Canyon, and that it includes the Arroyo Seco. There's so many communities that are actually within a wildlife corridor. So that's actually something we've really been thinking about, is how do we engage the communities in each part of this wildlife corridor, let them know, hey, you're living in a wildlife corridor. This includes people in apartments. This includes people that only have balconies. They're still living within a wildlife corridor. How do we have local communities, local neighborhoods take ownership of that and take pride in that and say, yes, like this is a corridor. This helps to keep our whole, the whole land and area where we live healthy. I really am going to want to give more thought to that. I know my colleagues are as well. But it's something that I really think our goal is we want people to be aware of that and to take great pride in that and to take ownership of that.
You mentioned Hahamanga, a couple of times from your childhood and also, as a piece of this project you're describing. I know there was a recent lawsuit settlement. Do you want to talk about what that brought and the opportunities that are there now?
Well, probably I did. I've read the settlement, and I'm so pleased. I'm so happy with the Arroyo Seco Foundation, Tim Brick, and with the Pasadena Audubon Society, including Laura Solomon, Mitch Sy, who's the attorney for the lawsuit, which was against the LA County. It's their official name, the flood control district, I think it is. Anyway, against the county, but for those who don't know, I mean, there's been a big dig behind Munga, if anyone's familiar with the area, and the county's removing a whole bunch of sediment, and so there was a lawsuit to try to make sure that project was more environmentally responsible right now and going forward, which is really important, right? For the future of Munga. And basically, I mean, I'm thrilled with the settlement. I think it's a huge accomplishment. All the folks who are involved in that, to me, they're like heroes. And I've been going to Munga more lately. I've been, going on runs up there, and I was just there yesterday, just looking around, because I'm so optimistic for the future of Munga. This settlement, very briefly, and again, I'm not the best person to speak to that. That's probably, some of the people who are part of the settlement are best to talk to. But it reduces the footprint of the permanent. It's actually no longer a permanent maintenance area. It's going to be more periodic removal of sediment. There's going to be more habitat restoration around the dam. There's going to be a pool of water is going to be maintained there until July 1st. So the area behind the dam that isn't going to have restored habitat, it's going to be more like almost like a lake. It's going to look like, and that's going to provide habitat for waterfowl, like ducks and geese and all sorts of other things. And so it's going to look much more natural. So I think it's just overall, it's a really wonderful thing for the future of Munga. Some of the roads and stuff that the county bulldozed for their trucks, they're going to be restored. So, that's really hopeful. So overall, I think it's just an excellent result after all these years of, basically battle. I think it's very hopeful for Munga. I also find myself newly appointed to the Munga Watershed Park Advisory Committee. That committee was reconstituted. It was they were going to disband it before I got involved, and then we voted and we decided that we're going to keep it, but we're going to reconstitute it. We're going to basically kind of change the members and stuff on there to hopefully make it more effective. And so I am now on that. We're going to have a meeting, I think, on July 28th or something. And really what I've been thinking about Munga lately, especially since I've been going there, the settlement's great. The city has a master plan, has a lot of really good stuff in it. It includes a lot of restoration. And this goes back to education. There's these Forest Service buildings. Have you seen the old Forest Service buildings up in Munga? They're like mid-century. I used to think they were just kind of falling apart and, just these old cinder block buildings, but they kind of have a mid-century charm to them. It's kind of like Smokey Bear-esque type stuff, And in the master plan for Munga, the city of Pasadena's master plan, that all is supposed to be a really big, huge, wonderful environmental education center. And that's somewhere we could educate all of our youth. That's somewhere that I envision, and I know many others do, that could be the staging point for the restoration of Munga. That could be a place where, we bring all of our young people, where we can educate them in nature and have it be like a living laboratory, like an outdoor classroom. I also think this could be somewhere where we could have a lot of collaboration between different nonprofits, different environmental groups. I would love to see like Outward Bound Adventures, all sorts of different groups sort of having a cross-pollination in this environmental space and helping to oversee programs. And so something that I hope that we can really move forward in my time on the Munga Advisory Committee is I really want to prioritize, and this is just me speaking, but I really hope that we can prioritize getting some nonprofits in there, making those buildings usable, because you can't find more funding for something until you already have something going on, until you already have something that you need to build upon. And so I really am very hopeful, and I really hope that we can get something going on in those buildings before they just fall apart. And we can get other organizations in there. And again, this is, in my mind, empowering people in the community who are already doing the work. And so for me, that's the most hopeful thing in Hahamunga, is hopefully moving some of that stuff forward. So I've been thinking a lot about Hahamunga lately.
It's been interesting though, with the conversation ongoing over many years, especially around the Big Dig, how much of a community it's drawn together. And one of the things that's come up frequently in those conversations is how many schools, all the way from preschool up through high school, are located immediately around the Hahamunga, and yet many of those students have no connection to it. Bacanyata High School is at the entrance to the Hahamunga Watershed Park, and yet, as far as I know, there's no official programming that connects those students to the space right across the street. So I think there's so many opportunities there. Also with Muir High School, which is located nearby, and connecting those students to that space. There are a lot of really exciting opportunities, like you said, over there.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I just love these stories of the community banding together and taking a land that was blighted and asking if, how can we band together and make something more beautiful and more sustainable, such as Arlington and such as this new project, which is just immensely exciting to me. And, let's continue the conversation about it. And if you can share resources with us about it, or any help you need, we are happy to share it with Arlington visitors as well.
We had one other question from the audience, which was in relationship to climate change and how that affects our local condition, and how you might have had to adjust what restoration looks like to cope with changes that may come.
Wow, that's a really great question. I pretty much oversee the habitat restoration on the AFC nature preserves, and this is something I've talked to our biologist about. Mickey Long is our biologist, and sorry, I have a helicopter going over. Anyway, I've spoken to Mickey. Really, the approach that we're kind of taking right now is our main approach towards habitat restoration on our nature preserves is taking out the invasive plants and trying to just let the native plants, give them the best conditions to recover, to sort of, propagate themselves. And the reason that I personally like that approach, for now at least, it's a couple of reasons. The first thing is that, those are all the local genetics. And so as much as we can keep the local genetics and the stuff that's just propagating itself and sprouting from its own seeds, those tend to be the strongest, most resilient plants, even going down to like oak trees. I remember a few years back, we got a grant from the county to plant like 200 oak trees all over our properties, or 200 trees in general. They were mostly oaks. And so I'm going all over Altadena, planting oak trees everywhere. I'm planting 50 trees in, Millard Canyon, and 20 trees over in Rubio, I think we're lucky if maybe a quarter or a fifth of those trees have even survived. And we were running hose line down from the Meadows neighborhood up there in Altadena, like hundreds of feet down from someone's backyard down into Millard Canyon, just trying to water these things every week. And I've worked countless summers with interns just hauling buckets of water down, the dusty trails of Rubio Canyon. And I've just found that planting 1 gallons out in the mountains it's just an extremely difficult way to go, with our current circumstances. So when it comes to climate change, I really do tend to, try and just take out the invasives, help the native, the local genetics to sort of, recover. And we've had good success with that. There's been some conversation about whether we should start adopting more plants that are, like from the desert, plants from Baja California, or plants from the Mojave Desert into our landscapes. I don't think we're ready for that. I think on a personal level, I don't think that I would want to do that. I'd probably rather just focus on letting nature recover if possible. I think that might be something that could be good, though, in more of our urban environment, even at parks, for instance. I know a lot of people in urban forestry, one of the main reasons they plant non-native trees and shrubs and stuff is they say, oh, well, this is going to do well in this urban environment, like next to the sidewalk or next to a parking lot. And so if we can bring in things like Palo Verdes and maybe desert willows or plants from Baja and from our California deserts, these might be more resilient in an urban environment and still provide that habitat and save water and provide a lot of benefits. So I think it's up for debate. I'm not an expert on that, but that's generally been our approach up until now, with the changing climate and the drought and so on and so forth, is just really to try and get the invasives out.
I want to add to that too, because I realize that a lot of the ways that we think about climate change are especially as a lot of them are correlated to CO2 emissions, right? And our atmospheric climate change. Something that gets less attention is how much our plants create and affect our local climate. So, for example, you mentioned oak trees. So here, especially in Pasadena and all over the area, but we've actually changed our temperature just by removing trees. So we have less shade and we have less of a cooling effect from that tree canopy. So even just trying to reestablish a tree canopy is going to affect our local climate. Not to mention the CO2 they actually draw down at the same time, right?
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. And I just want to mention something on that. I run in the Arroyo several times a week, and so I grew up down there. I've been down there for years, and I've noticed. I have like a mental, database of all the big oak trees that, for one reason or another, have died and haven't been replaced. And so I really do agree with you on that, and I think we need to really prioritize having that healthy, succession, the plant succession of our trees and our urban forestry and stuff like that. And so I think we definitely need to do a lot better job of that, prevent that heat island effect and so on and so forth.
You want to ask the big question?
All right, we're going to end on the biggest question.
Oh no.
What is your personal hope and vision for the future if you continue doing your work and gain even more support from your community and more people within the community want to help? What is the end result of that?
You both like to ask the big questions in life, right? Well, I guess I kind of described how, for me, I've found it so, really it's the most encouraging and inspiring thing for me is the work that's being done in the community. So, I try to fit into that and find my place in that. And I love collaboration. I love to collaborate with people on these common sorts of goals. And so, at the end of the day, when I'm picturing what the end result is, I guess it's like a healthy ecosystem. It's all of us working together and creating a truly, you talked about equity, an equitable, regenerative society, right? There's so many wonderful things we could be doing and that people are doing. And I guess I would just love to see that just sort of, I don't know. I want to see a lot more. I want to see a lot more of that going on. I want to see a world where we don't have plastic pollution. I find it tragic that so many of our problems, even some of our worst problems, are totally preventable. Like you were talking about with trees, Levi, or, I've been a big advocate, against plastic pollution. It's like, why do our oceans need to be full of plastic? Why? It's not just the oceans, it's the web of life. We don't have to do that. There are better ways. I know there's lots of folks in our area working on zero waste. Altadena Green Circle, that was a wonderful local effort. So, I'd love to see zero waste implemented. I want to see these things become the norm. I want to see our parks become more like Arlington, saving water, providing habitat, providing education and contact with nature. And you discussed, Levi, something that I'm very passionate about, which is not only bringing people to the foothills and letting people know what's out there in the mountains, but bringing nature to the city. I would like to see a seamless transition between nature, between the city and and the mountains and the natural open space. I don't think that you can draw a boundary between one and the other. I would like it to be seamless, if that makes sense. You know, I'd like to see nature in every yard, in every corporate complex, you know, building, right? In the parkways and our parks, and, you know, naturalize our streams and, you know, our schools, and provide education everywhere that we go, and a healthier ecosystem. You know, so I guess for me, it's just very, very holistic. And, you know, that's, in my mind, what I think all of us in our own various ways are working toward. So that's the world that I envision. And I know everyone is working on their own part. We all have our own thing that we're passionate about, our own, you know, areas of expertise. And, you know, so what I envision is all of us just kind of working together and collaborating and learning from each other, and, you know, moving the world forward and making that happen. So that's kind of my end goal of what I hope for.
Well, thanks so much for joining us and sharing with us and providing your thoughtfulness and passion and optimism. It's been really inspiring.
Thank you, Paloma.
Thank you for all the work you do.
Oh, well, you know, it's not that much. You know, I enjoy doing it. And really the biggest reward is getting to know folks like you. And I wish we could all get together more. I look forward to that day. But I mean, that's really, it's, you know, it is its own reward. And I'm sure you both understand that.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks,
Thank
Paloma.
you.
Thank you, Levi. Good to see you both.
You too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.